Hello and welcome to Islamic Awakening, a program that delves deeply into the issues affecting both Islam and Muslims today. I am your host, Ahmed Hanif. Today I'm asking Professor Tariq Ramadan, what challenges do Muslim women face living in the Western world? In the West, the common stereotype of a Muslim woman is that of a woman hidden behind a veil, a voiceless, silent figure bereft of rights. In recent times, Muslim women have also borne the brunt of anti-Islamic sentiment, such as has been the case in France, where a heavily pregnant Muslim woman was attacked recently. Muslim women living in the West also continue to face many challenges and struggles when it comes to practicing their faith in Western countries. So what is the solution to these challenges? What are they? First of all, why this stereotype? It does exist. This idea that the Muslim woman is veiled and voiceless and oppressed. They insist that Muslim women are oppressed in the clothing that they wear and so on. Where does this stereotype come from? What is its function?
I think it's important for us to, on that topic and this very specific topic, which is a critical one for us as Muslims, to look at what is said by the West and also what is happening within our own societies. The state of denial that we have problems sometimes when it comes to dealing with women, I don't think it's healthy. From an intellectual viewpoint, from a religious viewpoint, and I keep on repeating, Islam has no problems with women, but Muslims have. Because they don't know how to deal with the scriptural sources.
Right.
So there is something which is a sincere perception that there are problems. And then we have politicians and intellectuals that are instrumentalizing this by making it a way to target Islam and to make it perceived as a backward religion. It's not new. The colonizers, when they arrived in the Middle East, or even in my country of origin, Egypt, Cromwell, refusing women to vote in Britain and going to Egypt by saying, we want to free the woman and they have to get rid of this veil. Okay, look, there is a contradiction here, and it's the same who is promoting women's rights in Egypt is against women being involved in politics in Britain. So there are instrumentalizations and a way of targeting Muslims. We, as Muslims, before responding to the environment, we have to come to our own responsibilities. And it always starts like this as Muslims. We look at ourselves and say, okay, what's wrong with us? Or is there something wrong? And I would say that from an Islamic viewpoint, what we are witnessing today is different interpretations and two main problems. The first one is literalism, that we have some scholars who are reading the Quran in a very literalist way and not putting things into perspective. And this reducing the meaning of the Quran, the literalist understanding, is to come with a discourse which is putting women in a second-class status within the Islamic community. And for example, you have today, while I'm talking to you, mosques where there is no space for women, while the Prophet, peace be upon him, was teaching the people to listen to his own daughter who was coming to talk within the mosque during Fajr prayer. So she was visiting, and now we have no space. Or very wrong way of dealing with, women within the community. So we have this way of dealing, for example, within the couple within marriage and pushing, saying the woman should not even speak and she has no right to choose her husband. That's wrong. This is things that are reducing the meaning. And we have a second problem, is that our great scholars in history were looking at the text through a cultural perspective. So there is one problem, which is reduction of the text to the literal meaning. And the second problem is projecting onto the text the cultural environment, which we can deny that some scholars were great scholars when it came to understanding the text, but they were in a specific culture. One of my great teachers is Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, the one who was called in his time Hujjatul Islam, meaning the proof of Islam. And he came with very strong, a deep understanding of philosophy, Sufism, and Sharia, and fiqh. But when he was to speak about the relationship between men and women, he had this understanding that the relationship is about slave and master. So we should understand that the scholar could be great, but not always right, because he is projecting onto the text something which is coming from his culture. Let us start with this, that we have today scholars telling you a woman cannot drive. And you want to deny the fact that in the West, when you look at this, you say, there is a problem here. Yes, there is a problem. Yes, there is a problem. We have to face it as it is. It's completely wrong to promote such literalist understanding and not to let the woman go to the mosque and not to let the woman speak their mind. And we are celebrating Aisha radiallahu anha and other figures because she was a scholar, or Khadija because they were the wife of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And then we come to our own woman, no way, no space, nothing. And then we have these cultural things that, no, Islam came to take the best from the cultures, but not to imprison our interpretation of the text by a culture. So we have a problem. So here we have to question our way of reading with the scriptural sources and come to the true understanding, or at least the diversity of understandings where a woman should be able to pray, should be involved. You know, they were involved in the bay'ah, bay'at al-Rasul, yes. So they went to come and say, this is a political act, which is, we trust you as a leader. So now, we don't have this?
But we have certain principles and practices in Islam that, at least on the surface, might seem to be very fundamentally opposed to modern ideas of freedom and equality and so forth. Take, for example, restricting women from being judges. You know, you have this in Islamic sources, that women should not be judges, for example. And when people tend to argue for that by saying women are emotional and it could cloud their judgment, but we have Western examples of many women who are judges who do not have clouded judgment, you know, by their emotions. Or for example, women getting half the inheritance of a man, you know, and things of that nature, right? How do we justify this? How do we defend Islam, you know, in the face of that type of attack?
I think that is exactly the starting point of what I was saying, that some of the interpretations that we had of the text are one of interpretation or majority position among others. And we have to question this. Is this the only interpretation? For example, in many schools of law, in many schools of interpretation, we have this understanding today that to be a judge for a moment, it's not a problem. This is a traditional position, and we have it in the Shia tradition as well as in the Sunni tradition, that there is not a problem. Even when this interpretation that the women are more emotional, some scholars a very long time ago saying that's not the point, that's not al-illa, it's not the raison d'être or the ratio legis of the hukm. It's not this, is in fact she has to get some knowledge within the field. So for example, a woman who is a physician and she has to testify when she knows what she's talking about, that's enough. And you had scholars saying, so you see, this is where we have to be very cautious, for example, from an Islamic perspective, with our average ordinary Muslims, but also some scholars, to think that there is only one opinion. There are many, and scholars were coming with different views and different understanding of the text. So when it comes, for example, with the inheritance, that's true that in one occurrence, out of so many where women are getting as much as men or even more than men in some situation, is that when it's straight from the father and the mother and the child, a girl, a boy, she can get half of it. You can't explain this if you don't come with the whole philosophy of family. So if you extract one point, it could be unjust. But for us, we also have to understand al-qasd, which is al-maqsad, meaning the objective of the rule, and then you also have to think about if you can't achieve the objective, you might have also to responsibilize the people when it comes to the relationship between brothers and sisters. All this is part of our very great legal tradition. We cannot just reduce this by saying, this is it, or the literalist understanding. So what I wanted to say, in fact, is that we need to get with this critical thinking and say, okay, we are not only dealing with facts, we are dealing with a philosophy of life. There is a consistency here that we have to explain. And also we as Muslims, we have to be self-critical. There are many things in Muslim majority countries that are against Islam when it comes to women. That's not right. There is something wrong. And it's a very much a patriarchal culture that we have in the Middle East or in Asia or in Africa. Does it mean now that we come in Western societies and say yes to everything? No, this is why we say, okay, look, when it comes, for example, to the autonomy for a woman to be able to decide for herself, promoting education, autonomy within the society to get to the job market when she has the skills to do so, we agree with all this. Even more than that, as Muslims, to have this idea that with the same skills, you only get 70% of the salary of a man, that's not us.
Discrimination.
This is a discrimination. So look at our presence now in the West saying, look, we have to struggle on this side and to say, that's wrong, same skills, same salary. And we have to be involved in this discussion.
But this idea about Islam being patriarchal, right, isn't it? I mean, for example, prophets could only be men. Prophets could only be men. The ruler of the society, I mean, the Islamic ruler of the society, of an Islamic society, must be a man. I have to say that because we have Muslim societies where you have rulers who are women, and people tend to bring that example as women being rulers, which I think it might be a bit problematic. But in an Islamic society, the Khalif, for example, right, must be a man, or the Imam must be a man. The father is the head of the household, you know. The husband, there's so many riwayat and hadith that talk about the husband being primary, being the head, the wife having to obey the husband and so on. What else do we have? I mean, it seems to me to be patriarchal. So what's wrong with being patriarchal from an Islamic point of view?
I would say be careful with this because here we are confusing between some interpretation and the culture, the surrounding culture. The great majority of what happened with our history is true, that the center of Islam is a patriarchal culture. And that's true, this happened.
The center of Islam?
At the beginning, yes.
Oh, yes, yes.
It's Mecca and Medina,
right, okay.
and even, by the way, Medina was quite different because for some tribes there, they were matriarchal tribes. And this also helps us to understand why the situation of women in Medina was better than in Mecca. And this is why Umar ibn al-Khattab was surprised. They answered back, how come? And said the Prophet ﷺ smiled and said, you have to take it as because he was talking to his daughter and say, this is the way I am with the Prophet ﷺ. So we have to get this into our understanding. Now, in all the examples that you took, there are things that we have to discuss in our interpretation. The fact that the messengers, that's beyond, are men, that's true, but that doesn't mean that because they were men, we are not having in our history examples that we have to follow as well as the good examples. That's the fact that it's only men, that's not our choice. Now, when we come to analyzing the way things are going to be within the family, the way things should be within the society. First, for example, the fact that it's not possible for a woman to be a leader. This has been contested very soon, very early, that people say, why not? Why don't we have a woman being a leader? And if you come even to the hadith, where some were questioning the hadith, because there is one narrator here called Abu Bakr, that was not, this was the one who was involved in the situation in the Quran between the Prophet ﷺ and Aisha. So be careful with this. It's not as clear as that. And by the way, in many Muslim majority countries, and even in Iran, there is nothing preventing a woman from becoming president. Is this against Islam? It's not. It's one of interpretation among others. So we have something which is our interpretation here should also be cautious when it comes. This might not be the final answer of Islam. It was an interpretation in history, and we have to be very cautious when it comes, for example, within the family. Be careful. The fact that you have a leading position within the family in the verse of the Quran, وَلِمَا يُنْفِقُ, because you are giving money, but it doesn't mean that you take the whole decision, because there is another verse talking about shura, and tashawurin, meaning that you have to discuss. And if you look at the Prophet ﷺ, he was taking decision with a shura within the family. This is also something which is important. When it comes now to the political system, are you going to only rely on men? No, you rely on men and women because they are part of the society and they have the same rights as you, men. So we also have to think about, be careful. The perception that we have a final answer within the society might be problematic. Now, also something which is important is that out of our history, we went to other cultures. And it might be that we have to think about the positive evolution here that we take from other cultures, things that are helping us to come closer to our understanding of the scriptural sources. So there is nothing wrong with a patriarchal culture, if and only if it's not distorting the very essence of the Quran.
Right, and if it's oppressive.
Oppressive, and even, for example, with the headscarf and everything, I would say, you know, I was involved in the discussion in the West about the headscarf and what happened, because in your introduction you were talking about France. I was saying, look, it's against Islam to impose into a woman to wear the headscarf. It's an act of faith, but it's against human rights to impose into her to take it off.
Right.
Let her be free, and there is not only one way of being free, which is the Western way of being free. Many Western women are not happy with this type of freedom that we have now, because there is an oppression of the look. The way you look is who you are. In the job market, you don't get a job when you are beyond 45 years old. You don't get a job if you don't have some standards when it comes to beauty and looking good. I think that this is also oppressive.
Of course.
So the liberating process should be ethical, but it should also be self-critical in the way that we are distorting our
So basically
religion.
you're implying that Muslim women not only are in the process of defining themselves within a Western context and according to the principles of Islam, but they can also be a motivating force in terms of the rights for women, for justice for women in a general sense in society.
Yes, yeah? I think that this is important. The other thing which is important, let us start by priority. Very often our institutions, you know, training the shuyukh, training the ayatollah, training, were mainly male for male, which in history was not quite correct. You had women being involved in the process. I think that what we need now is
being scholars of Islam.
Exactly. We need women being scholars. That we need women, and we have to stop asking women to come only to speak when we are dealing with women. They should be involved in all the discussions when it comes to politics, when it comes to education, when it comes to the way we manage our mosque and the way we deal with science and knowledge today, because they have an influence. And so we need scholars. We need women being able to read the scriptural sources, Al-Quran wa Sunnah, and to come with an insight, which is important, because that's true. The way you read the Quran as a man is not the way you read it as a woman. Willing it or not, that's true.
Look at Amina Wadud, right? She's a scholar in Islam. And we say, okay, scholars, if you have the prayer, communal prayer, the scholar leads the prayer.
No,
she's in front
but exactly the point, because before saying this, for example, for her, she came with very interesting questions. A woman, as a scholar, could come with very interesting questions. It doesn't mean that you agree with all her answers. So what she was saying, by the way, many people don't know that in our tradition, for example, I'm a Sunni. In the Sunni tradition, you had Ibn Taymiyyah saying that it's right for a woman to lead the prayer with men if she is at the back.
Like lead the prayer.
Lead the prayer.
From the back.
From the back, because the gesture is not to be in the front because of a question of modesty. So we have, our tradition is wider than what we are doing out of it, because we don't know. And it's exactly the same in the Shiite tradition. You will see very, very courageous positions coming from scholars. They were very courageous, but we don't want to talk about this. And sometimes we don't want to talk about this, or we are ignorant of it, because we are so scared that the West is going to colonize us, that we prefer haram, we prefer don't go that way, and very often the weak link within our discourse is women. So let us be very strict with women. This is the way we are resisting the West. I would say that we need to understand something, we as Muslims, that it might be that the strongest element within the Muslim societies, Muslim majority countries, are the women, much more than the men today. All the statistics are showing us that when it comes to schools, Muslim women today are doing better than men.
Definitely.
That's the reality of it. So if
but
our future...
something, it's not just among Muslim women, it's among women in general.
Exactly.
We find women outperforming men in contemporary society more so than men. And I have a feeling it's not because of women, it's because of video games.
I don't know why it is, but I can say something, is that very often, I would say it's true what you are saying in all the societies, but more clearly in Muslim majority countries and in the southern countries, or in the West, the gap between what the women are achieving and the men is wider within the Muslim communities. And this is something which has to have an impact in our decision, in the way we look at the future. When you have more educated women, and even in the West, we are saying to women, you have to marry a Muslim men, and some women are coming to you say, where are they? Where are these men you are talking about? Not educated, not involved. And it's a wake-up call for all of us. Our future is for men to be involved in education, be involved in the job market, and to stop just going back to the countries of origin and getting women from there, because they are not at the level which is required here. So it should be a virtuous circle where we are pushing and understanding that women should be involved. And what I see on the ground today is much more educated Muslim women coming with a deep understanding. They want to remain Muslim, they are sincere, and they are doing their best. We need to rely also on them, on a better understanding of Islam, being faithful to the Islamic principles when it comes to education, social commitment in our mosques. These are things that are so important. So I would say it doesn't mean that we just acknowledge or accept everything coming from the West. I would say that women, Muslim women, could be a driving force to improve the situation in the West when it comes to spirituality, principles, and gender even, but in the right way of putting the equation.
You know what? I think this should be part one.
A long discussion, I agree.
It should be part one of a series of discussions on this idea of women. You know, I think it's a very, very good that we open this subject, you see, especially to be honest with our sources and not cherry pick in order to satisfy our insecurities. Sadly, we have run out of time, really run out of time. I would like to thank Professor Tariq Ramadan and, of course, all of you at home for watching. And until next time, on another edition of Islamic Awakening, it's a goodbye from me and the whole team.